Welcome to another episode of Not Investment Advice. We've got the NIA boys here today. Trung Phan. What's going on, Trung, mate?
Good, man. I'm good. A little bit sweaty right now. It's cooking. It's
all right.
cooking in
you got a little
Vancouver.
heat wave there as well. And then we got our boy, Jack Butcher, founder of Visualize Value. And I'm Bilal Zaidi, as always. Yeah, mate, there's been like a 40 degrees Celsius situation in London. Did you see that? And the whole of Europe is cooking pretty hard right now.
Oh, yeah. No AC over there. It's some good meme circulation on the AC prevalence in Europe.
Wait, what is it all? Is AC not super prevalent because of the Greens?
I think 3% of British households have AC. And I think it was 49 degrees Celsius in some places in the UK last week.
Is it because of the environmental?
That's mad.
Is it environmental stuff?
No, it's just you don't have weather that's extreme enough to justify it.
Yeah.
Fair.
Yeah, but you know, as soon as it hits 21 degrees, people getting their tops off in the UK, man. Or they're hitting
18 degrees,
getting that skin going.
18 degrees is not shirt off weather.
Shirtless pints. Yeah, it is.
Shirtless. You know, Jack's done a few shirtless pints back in the day and a few shirtless curries too at the end of the night.
Let me throw you guys the invention of the air conditioner. It's one of humanity's greatest inventions. I'm actually going to throw it up there. The greatest example is Singapore. Singapore is one of the richest countries in the world per capita for its size. It could not exist without the air conditioner. I believe Lee Kuan Yew.
Fun fact fan early today.
Hold on. Lee Kuan Yew on air conditioners. So Lee Kuan Yew is probably top 5 leader in the second half of the 20th century, the founding father of Singapore. This is what he said. Yeah, he says air conditioning was the most important invention for the country of Singapore. Perhaps one of the most important inventions in history. So there you go.
What are you saying? It produced a bunch of economic value for Singapore, or you're saying
it couldn't function as a country?
It couldn't exist without AC.
They couldn't.
Probably both though, because if everyone's frying, you can't be going to work. You can't be making stuff.
You couldn't even make an economy.
I didn't even realize it was that hot.
Oh, Singapore. I mean, here, let me fun fact fan you guys.
It's swampy there.
Well, look where it is on the map. Singapore.
And while Trung pulling that up, Trung, you pulled it up, and I'm just going to tell people what we've got coming here. So look, it's been a massive week for Amazon. They recently just bought One Medical for about $4 billion. We're going to break that down. But more importantly, talk about the best acquisitions of all time on the Amazon side. That's a short one, and then we're going to get straight into the AMA. A lot of you have been submitting really, really cool questions in our Telegram group. If you're new here, you haven't joined that already, you can click the link in the description below and join us there. We got like 15 amazing questions there. We're going to try to tackle most of them today. So Trung, what's the average temperature, mate? Is that what you're looking at?
No, I'm not sure. I'm just going to show you where it is for the people that may not realize how near the equator it is. So I actually didn't even realize till I lived in Southeast Asia. So here we go.
Oh, wow.
So we know Bilal Zaidi's been in this region, but for the listeners,
being in this region.
So
yeah, definitely have. I mean,
were you single or were you with the partner?
No, I think I was single then, yeah. But I mean, it depends which part you're talking about. I mean,
let's
I've also been to Pakistan.
Two very different trips.
That's definitely true. That's definitely.
Hold on a second. No, so your boy Trung Stunna lived in Ho Chi Minh City here. So I'm like, oh, Ho Chi Minh City, that's pretty near the equator. Like, here's the equator. For the listeners, I'm just pointing at a map of Southeast Asia. Pull it up on your phone if you're listening, or if you're running or on a bike, don't do that. But check out Singapore. Here it is. Here's the equator, and here's Singapore.
I didn't realize it was that close. Yeah.
Yeah, dude.
Wow,
so
that's crazy.
I remember the first time I went to Singapore, I got off. So I'm in Vietnam. I'm like seasoned. I'm like, oh, I can handle the tropical Asian heat. I get off the plane in Singapore, just like, whoosh. Like, you know that humidity
the
that
heat
hits?
as you leave the plane, right?
Yeah, the heat well, that happens a lot of places, but like you go to Morocco, same thing happens anywhere near Africa, but like the hit, oh man.
You smell it. You smell the heat, man.
Yeah.
All right, boys, let's get to the best. Well, actually, Jack has got a meme of the week for us to kick us off because we've skipped that a couple of weeks. So I think our boy Jack has one for today.
Oh, Jack, I think your mic's off, brother.
I said meme of the week is homegrown this week. I'm sharing it now.
With the heavies.
A very niche meme. We got a split screen here. If you're watching the video, you can obviously see this, but I'll try and do my best at explaining it. We got a split screen, two characters from very different segments of the financial culture. On the left, we got Nancy Pelosi answering a question about whether or not her husband is trading on insider information, and her reaction to that question. And then on the right-hand side, we got a meme that Trung has been known to use on a number of occasions. I forget this dude's name, but it's a guy that went on CNBC, was talking about his amazing stock portfolio, and he got asked what one of the companies that he was talking about did, and he goes, sorry, you're breaking up. So sorry. So just juxtaposing those two moments. Exactly. So very niche, but if you did enjoy it, I appreciate you, and we're going to keep the low TAM memes on the way.
Wait, I got one last thought on that. Sorry, I know we're delaying getting to the AMA, but listeners, you just got to deal with Trung Stunner sometimes. We had Michael Saylor talking for 90 straight minutes 2 weeks ago, so I want a couple words. The last thing I'll add on that is I liked a Nancy Pelosi meme like a couple weeks ago. And this just speaks to how crazy the internet is. And some dude had seen that I liked the meme, and he just hits my DMs. He goes, "Hey man, I see that you're boosting the signal on some conspiracies about Nancy."
No way.
I enjoyed a lot of your stuff, but I'm going to stop following you now. I'm like, first of all, kick rocks, buddy.
Which meme? I want to know which meme.
It was the one when the CHIPS Act came out, the Semiconductor Act. She's like calling her husband. Is like, buy NVIDIA right now.
I mean, did that not happen? How's that a conspiracy?
I know. People think it's
allegedly, mate.
Dude, but here's the thing. If you're a Democrat, you just want to believe it's not true, right? You're like, oh, she's allowed to do that. It's not illegal. It's not illegal. It should be, but it's not. So that's like
and just so for people who haven't been following this properly, there's a lot of speculation that her and her husband have been buying a bunch of stuff and profiting from it for a long time. But even she got asked about it directly.
So Jack's meme is being asked about it. But the whole point is, let me add this, is like, whether or not it's true, okay? Paul Pelosi might be the greatest investor ever. The optics are so bad. The optics, here's another thing. She... outside of the administration,
your high pitch just kicked she.
Let's keep it going. Keep it going.
Okay,
don't lose the energy.
Dude, Bilal, you're killing me, buddy.
Sorry, mate. So
she and her husband are apparently planning a trip to Taiwan, and that's a geopolitical hotspot.
I thought they already went. I don't
think they've gone yet. I think it's being planned. The Chinese government has back channeled and said, if you come to Taiwan, there will be a military response. As in, they're going to send ships down to fucking Taiwan Strait to be like, this is not cool. A Speaker of the House has not gone to Taiwan in 25 years. Now, last point, I support the Taiwanese people and the right to self-defense, and I believe Taiwan is a country, but you got to do this tactfully, right? So that's it.
You got another person in your DMs now, Trung. Things to avoid on the internet.
Yeah, done. Go ahead.
All right. Boys, I got to keep us on track now. Let's get to the good stuff. Amazon's best acquisitions. Trung, let's see the list here. For people who are only listening and not watching, which is most people, could we explain what happened this week, but also what you're showing on the screen right now?
All right, so Bilal mentioned that Amazon acquired One Medical. It runs 180, I think, primary care facilities around America.
One in the Google office, by the way, in New York.
So, Bilal, please tell us. Can you tell us what One Medical offers?
I only used it like once because I think they only brought it in as I was leaving, but they're essentially like an on-site, on-premises doctor. And I mean, I don't really know too much more than that apart from that. It was like within the office though, like you go in the elevator and you turn up on the floor, and they do a lot of stuff on site. And I think it's, do you pay, if it wasn't through Google, I think you would be paying like every month or something?
I believe the annual subscription is $200, and then you have to pay for any other future services. But it's like paid for primary care, right? And obviously, Google is one of the largest customers. What's interesting about the deal is people may remember the last 5 years, Amazon's trying to pick away at healthcare. So they had a huge deal with JP Morgan and Berkshire Hathaway. I don't know if you guys remember this, but the three companies combined were trying to figure out healthcare because between the three of them, they employ millions of people, right? Like all the Berkshire like subsidiaries. So they're like, can we figure out healthcare? Like A, selfishly because we spend so much on it, but B, if we can, it's like the whole ethic of Amazon where they'll solve a problem for themselves, like Amazon Web Services.
Like Costco hot dogs as well.
Yeah. Exactly.
So I don't want to have to go too much detail about the acquisition because I know nothing about healthcare, but with some criticisms I've heard about the deal is like, here's the upside. If it's a way for Amazon to crack into millions of potential customers in healthcare, they can build out the rest of their medical business. They have Amazon Care as an existing subsidiary. They own PillPack. Do you guys use PillPack? It's a pharmacy.
But I've used something similar. Like, is that where they deliver it to your door, sort of thing?
Exactly. So they're building all the pieces for a healthcare solution, right? But I think the larger criticism, or people are like kind of suspect about, it is like, healthcare is effing hard, right? Like everybody knows this. Healthcare is effing hard. There's no guarantee they'll succeed. The other thing is when the Whole Foods acquisition happened, and this is Ben Thompson gets a mention once a month at least. He was just like, he had written widely about it. He's like, well, Whole Foods is going to be a complete game changer for Amazon. They're going to crack retail because Amazon always wants a first best customer to test on, which is always themselves, right? So by owning Whole Foods, they could try to figure out retail delivery. And even if it doesn't really go commercial, they've at least solved it for themselves. But man, 5 years later, do you guys know any like tangible difference between Whole Foods before and after the Amazon acquisition? Has there been any integration or anything special? Not to my mind.
I mean, I think I remember when it first happened, I feel like the prices were, I still shop from there every week. So like the prices did go a little bit down. Like there were certain things I was like, oh, straight away I noticed that. And now over time, they're actually gone way up. Obviously with inflation recently, I'm now having to go down to a local bodega and get like asparagus for like $18 or something. So I think they had the scan thing. Like at the end, you get some sort of reward in the Amazon app. Like there's some stuff like that, but not
nothing
really.
Game changing, right?
No, nothing at all.
What about yourself, Jack? Do you feel anything? Do you shop at Whole Foods?
Yeah. The Prime like rewards is that's what you're talking about.
Yeah,
Bilal,
I think
right?
that's the same thing.
I think the delivery stuff might have gotten more sophisticated.
Oh, that's true. That's a good one actually.
Okay.
I pretty much only get delivery from there, and that is pretty good. Except
it was
now
Instacart before, right? It was like third party thing, and now they have all that in house. And I think 50% of the people in the store are like picking orders instead of shopping. Now.
Good point. Okay,
that's interesting. Okay.
Well, let me add the last thought on One Medical is if they bundle it with Prime, that's actually really smart, right?
Oh, that's interesting.
Like Bilal, to your point, you maybe wouldn't have paid $200-300 a year for One Medical, right? But your employer paid it. But if you're already paying for Prime, maybe you'll kick an extra $2 a month to get One Medical, right? Because the jump to pay for that, it solves it for One Medical also, right? Like the customer acquisition side. So that could be interesting. We'll see.
Here's a controversial question. You know, people like attack it saying it's complicated. It's like, what's the alternative? Like, who's a more sophisticated entity working on the problem? The U.S. government.
Yeah, well, the entire U.S. healthcare system is extremely complicated because of how it's built between the insurers, and you know why? Like,
no, I know it's complicated. I'm just saying, like, who better than Amazon?
Who better to solve it?
Right.
Yeah.
Got you.
Well,
yeah.
The reality has, to your point, is like, do we trust the government to solve healthcare? Right? It's already gotten so out of hand, but they just have all the levers. Like, all Amazon can really do is kind of what Uber did with taxis, right? Is you force them to make changes, but it's a lot different because it's healthcare. That's a great question though. Like, who else? Who else would you want? Google maybe?
Yeah, I always hear this. Like, I remember when COVID was first like kicking off, it was like, let Amazon run the logistics for distributing like
Bezos
everything. Yeah. And like, who would you have rebuild the US military and logistics for? Like, like Amazon is just the most absurdly sophisticated business. It's just like hard to even fathom how incredible even the anticipation of stuff. Celia was talking about this the other day. It's like you order this like the most obscure item And it's like, yeah, it can be there by 4 o'clock today. It's like, what?
Yeah, it doesn't make
How
any
does that
sense.
even make sense? How does that even work?
Well,
And
actually,
I think they know
go
what
on.
you're going to order before you order it, right? Like the amount of data they have
They get you in trouble, mate, on the shared account.
It's got to like rival. I don't know. It's got to rival Google for the amount of information or like a profile on you. It's like revealed preferences.
Yeah.
What the information they have on you.
Not like obviously
food.
Google has the search, but like the actual, like you purchase this or we're looking to buy. It's like as bottom funnel as it gets.
Yeah,
like,
There's no greater intent, right? Yeah.
Media, like consumer goods and food at this point, where it's like you're buying this from Whole Foods, you're watching this at night, and you're buying, this, and this product in the day. It's like,
that's
who has
full
a better
stack
profile than
Maslow
that?
hierarchy of needs there, mate.
No doubt, mate.
Well,
you prime rent, prime cars, prime is coming.
Well, let's talk about Bilal. You're itching to knock out the marketing terms. Google is intent.
I just made that one up
intent,
there, but
right?
yeah. That's true. Yeah, the intent part. Yeah.
But Bilal, what I mean to your point though is like, there's nothing more intent based than the actual purchase. Like I talk a lot about buying a lot of things, but not until you hit that button is the intent actually
Completely.
Right? Bottom of the funnel.
Yeah, 100%.
Boys, can I do a quick screen share?
Yes.
Yeah,
So
of
this
course.
was
Go
from
for it.
this is 8 years old. Amazon patents, I should say, anticipatory shipping to start
Unreal.
sending you stuff before you bought. This 8 years ago. I remember this headline. Just crazy, and obviously that's a lot closer to being true now.
Jack, could you say what was that again? Because I couldn't really see it on the screen. What
the
was
headline?
it? Yeah.
Anticipatory shipping.
Anticipatory shipping to start sending you stuff before you bought it, and like
Incredible.
obviously that hasn't happened exactly, but I bet that stuff is sitting in the hub waiting for you to check out.
But I think if you think about like the subscription stuff that they offer, like toilet roll and like toothpaste and stuff like that, and then when you get like the idea has always been you got the smart fridge and it knows the milk's out, all those kind of ideas you've heard forever.
Do you remember the button they did? Do you remember that?
The dash
Go.
button.
What was it?
The dash.
Dash. Yeah.
Complete failure. Well, Jack, to your point though, is like, I mean, ultimately, this is all. I mean, it's all machine learning AI, right? Is like, do you guys remember the most famous one was Target? Was when Target a couple years ago they're recommending like childcare stuff to a woman because she had purchased.
Oh yeah.
Like you remember, she had purchased a series of medicines, maybe like Plan B and maybe some sexual health care stuff, and like they started recommending, and then the parents found out, right? And it's like they knew, but like Amazon clearly is better than Target. But I think the point that Jack brought up, everything you talked about, actually touches perfectly into the acquisitions here, and we can actually start knocking down. And Jack actually made great points already about which ones are the best ones.
And Trunk, just while you're pulling up, I remember working on what was it called, Blue Nile or something, the diamond ring company. Is it Blue Nile? Yeah, this is like 2010, 11 or something. And if you just think about, we were talking about getting you in trouble. That's kind of what I had in mind. Imagine you're about to propose to your girlfriend / wife or whatever, or trying to get that fiance going. And like you share a computer and then you get that Blue Nile retargeting ad. That's gonna spoil a surprise, and it could be a lot worse.
I was just thinking
than
that when I was sharing that story right now, I had little banners on the side, stuff I've been looking at.
Yeah,
Whips,
exactly.
SUVs. There we go, brother. Here we go. Let's rip through this quickly. Amazon. So this is just Amazon's largest acquisitions outside of the One Medical, $4 billion. Whole Foods for $14 billion. So all I'll say about that is I don't think it's the best acquisition. I think it was a huge price tag. I think it'll be necessary for them down the road, but we don't. I'm not including it as the best acquisition. MGM for $9 billion. Also not crazy about that. What do you guys think about MGM at $9 billion?
I don't know enough about their portfolio. What's their like big stuff? Do you know?
Was it in the Bond?
Bond.
I think we did an episode on that when it happened.
Okay, but is it the best? I don't feel like it's the best. Okay, and I'll tell you guys why. So.
IMDb beats that one. I know that. I think Trung likes that one.
IMDb is not even on the list though. IMDb is one of their first acquisitions, $55 million in 1998.
That's sick.
Yeah, unreal, right? So here are a couple other ones. Zappos in 2010, I believe, for $1.2 billion. Zoox, which is autonomous driving, $1.2 billion last couple of years. Twitch.
Oh,
I'm hit Bilal
Twitch for
Zaidi with this one.
That's a banger.
Twitch is a banger for a bill. I can't remember when that was. I think it's 2015. Ring is in the last couple of years, $800 million. And then my personal, I think Kiva Systems, which is the robotics, It does all the robots in the warehouse. So for the viewers, I'll just play a video of what it looks like now. It's wild. Here is the robots in a sorting center right now. Look at that. Isn't that mad?
Mate.
That's the answers Jack's thing of like it coming at 4 p.m. the same day.
Yeah,
This is why.
Jack's
Oh,
wondering.
mate. Yeah, exactly. A little order goes in, nobody even has to touch it. Boys, I got a good story to tell you about. I worked in one of these for
Here we go.
Aldi.
Oh,
You know,
seriously?
the supermarket. Yeah.
Say more.
So it's a summer job, and you go in the morning, and there's like the distribution center was in the town I grew up in Swindon. So it's like M4 corridor. If you know the layout of the UK, it's like pretty central. I think it was like 70 stores, and you go in the morning, you get like pick lists. So it's like, you got 5 stores, and here's like, 2 or 3 pallets of stuff that's going to each store. And you drive a little forklift around, manually load it up, and then back the pallets into a loading bay, and then they go in a truck. And you get paid by the hour. But I used to work with like 3 or 4 lads I went to school with, and we try and do it as fast as we could. It's so stupid. Just like racing around. Yeah. Yeah.
What's the name of that British show where you race to collect groceries and then make the food?
Oh, supermarket sweep.
Yeah, exactly.
Classic.
Like that.
Oh, I haven't thought about that
I
for
got
20
so many
years.
good stories from that job. Like one guy was like, he had to pack like 3 pallets of whiskey once, and he like smashed a forklift into the side of it, totaled probably like 50 grand's worth of whiskey, and just coming in hungover and not driving the truck properly. But
Jesus Christ,
great job! It was a great job.
Jack, so you've done Honda factory and Audi, you said, yeah?
I got loads of this stuff, man. I worked in industrial shredders. Worked in like
so good.
There was so many weird jobs I did when I was a kid.
Well, that might be in the AMA. We've got a question in there for that, so we can revisit that in a second. Go on, what's the news?
Yeah, I'll just rip through the. I'll ask you guys each of these. So these were the 3 most popular replies. So I threw this, but I gotta do this more, man. The Twitter hive mind is incredible. So the 3 most popular responses by me scanning the answers were Kiva Systems, the robotics one. So that was 775 million in 2012. And the argument is, here's a threefold argument. Number 1, Amazon took that technology off the market. So these savages, they had long-term deals, Kiva, with Home Depot and Staples. Amazon just bought Kiva Systems. It's like, those contracts are canceled. Yeah. Yoink.
Bezos did.
Yeah. So they Bezos them took this technology off the market, this robotics automation technology. So for the listeners that didn't see it, it's basically these robots that just go around the factory floors. They scan barcodes and can basically just find items for individuals. And I'll tell you why it's important. Because a venture capitalist named AJ Agarwal wrote and said, I asked him, why is this a good deal? He goes, Amazon employs 1 million workers, the majority in fulfillment centers. Kiva 3 times the output of 1 worker. I mean, granted, they 3 times the output because they're complete savages and give them like 5-minute bathroom breaks after 9 hours, right? So they tripled the productivity in an Amazon worker. And so he gets into it though. So without Kiva, Amazon would need 3 million people. Amazon attrition is 3% a week. So this would imply 5 million workers.
3% a week, you said?
Yeah. Wow,
that's people leaving. 3% of the workforce leaves.
Yeah.
They'd
run out of people. That's a pretty good argument. Thank you, AJ. I hope I got your name right. So that's his argument. So I think there's twofold. They built an automated robotic system for Jack to get whatever he needs the next day without even asking for it. They took a key competitor off the market, and it's quote unquote only 775 million versus some of their multi-deca-billion acquisitions. So it reminds me of Apple's acquisition of PA Semiconductors in 2008, because not very sexy, not very many people know about it, but PA Semiconductor, which they bought for 280 million, laid the groundwork for Apple's entire chip business, which we've talked about in the past. And now they just
so like the M1, M2 chips have come from that.
Everything started from PA Semi, their team and their designers. So the technology under Kiva Systems is building the retail foundation. So that's the argument. The other 2 I threw out there is, and I'd love for you guys to opine on this. Ring for the data it collects and its access to the home. That was the argument. And Twitch, this is Bilal Zaidi zone. Twitch apparently has a 70% market share in online gaming and streaming, which Bilal knows how valuable that is, and makes, I think, $2 to $3 billion a year. So those are in the running. I would love your guys' thoughts. First, let's start with Ring. Do you guys own a Ring?
I don't own a Ring. Jack, you got one?
Nah.
Can I just add one more in there, which is not on the same scale, but Audible as well is an interesting one.
Fair enough.
I think they bought them only for 300 mil, I think, from when I looked it up. And, I kind of agree with what you said with Kiva. Like, that one is one of those unsexy things people don't know about. Well, it's actually quite sexy when you look at the video, but most people wouldn't know what it is, right? Audible, though, like if you think of audiobooks, you think of Audible because they are synonymous with it.
Yep.
And when they bought them, it was just, I actually was working on it at the time when it happened, and it was just, everyone's like, audiobooks, like, what are you talking about? And if you think, it's still a very early iPhone, and just now, if you think of that whole segment, is Audible, so they own that, and it's not necessarily about the amount of money they make from the subscription and the number of subscribers necessarily. It's just the whole reason Amazon started with books was because it was a way to get them into the Amazon ecosystem and sell them other stuff. So I think that's an interesting one as well, especially with time spent. I think that's a honorable mention. And then so I would agree with you, Kiva. Twitch is definitely up there, and then honestly, IMDb is a nice one just from the SEO guy in me. Like just if you think of a valuable property on the internet, like, any movie you search for that shows up, and again, bringing people into the funnel of Prime Video, your Amazon Prime long term, how valuable that is. I think I don't know how if they monetize it through they could essentially be selling affiliate deals or taking a cut when you click through to Apple or YouTube to buy or rent a movie or something as well. So that's an interesting one, which I think a lot of people don't think about.
Let me add on that. Somebody brought up a good point with these other deals. So Kiva is a cost center, but you can tease out the savings like we just did, right, with the amount of employees it saves. But the other ones, the argument, everybody's like, well, these other ones make revenue, right? And Zoox is autonomous driving. That could be another big one for cost savings. But the argument, I find the MGM. Let's talk about MGM a little bit. MGM, IMDb, Audible, all this content stuff. I mean, there's obviously a way to tease out and put in a spreadsheet the contribution to Amazon's revenue and the moat it builds. But I think all those, because there's so many of those pieces, that a single one gets diminished, you know what I mean, in terms of its impact. So yeah, I didn't do deep enough on this. I'm just doing with the hive mind. I feel like Kiva's the one. But I guess we'll see in 10, 20 years.
Jack, what about you, mate? Any last words on that before we do AMA?
Loads to talk about. I think the Whole Foods thing is most fascinating to me because I think they'll eventually try and go down market with that, try and build it's basically the ultimate subscription business, right? Like remember we talked about value investing. Like food is the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy, and if you make that accessible at scale, then it's basically a bulletproof business. So I think that's like the long-term play there. But I remember reading something about why they went. I mean, there is nothing else to buy at that scale, right? Yeah. I think distribution centers in the places where Whole Foods managed to get real estate too was really a powerful thing. Like they have secured quality buildings in metropolitan, really high density areas, which is obviously hard to do.
So there could be mini fulfillment centers, right?
Yeah. Like the access that it gives you to those consumers, at the high end of the disposable income scale as well, I think is part of the play. And then just the Ring and all of those ideas, as you were talking, it made me think about what their strategy is over 100 years. And it's vertically integrate the entirety of commerce, right? It's own the thing end to end, have the packages fulfilled automatically, have them delivered automatically, have them let into the house automatically with the Ring software, and then have the Prime lock-in where you're getting thousands of dollars of value for $200 a month or whatever it is. And I think that stat that comes out every year where they raise the price of Prime and they don't lose any subscribers, or they add subscribers or something, is just indicative of how sticky that product is. And everybody's seen the customer focus, Bezos rants about like, just make it as good as you can possibly make it and no one will ever leave. And like, that seems to be true. I think even more so people like, this is like revealed preferences thing. A lot of people complain about the effect of Amazon, but everybody uses it. I think there's a lot of contradiction in how people feel about it and talk about it. And then they actually end up sending their dollars to Amazon.
Intent, as Bilal Zaidi would say.
Indeed.
Well, the crazy thing is, Jack, what you're saying is, I think they just announced that they're going to be putting up the prices, right, in Europe because of inflation and stuff. And I don't know if they've done that much before. Trung, you might know. But it's like, I'm curious to see how that actually hits the numbers, because just narrative wise, like even just from the UK, like I still follow obviously very closely with friends and family, like the narrative there is of a cost of living crisis is like the phrase that's being used. And like, it's kind of happening everywhere, but in the UK, like it's the way like the credit crunch and like these kind of things that we all, or austerity, like there were all these things that just stick in people's minds, and it feels like that's already there with the UK, especially as they go into this election stuff with the Conservative Party new leader and stuff like that. So I'm curious, like even like a £1 increase, I'm curious how many people are going to be like, there's already like a negative sentiment to a lot of like big tech stuff there as well in Europe. I'm curious like how many people actually cut their subscription, or as Trung said earlier, like a lot of people say stuff but their actual behavior is different, be interesting to see that.
Their distribution is like like their ability to negotiate with their distribution is, I think, the thing that drives the ability to lock people in too. Like, I'm going to cancel Netflix and Hulu and keep Prime, to justify the price increase of Prime because I get X delivered through there. And it maybe even like, if medicine becomes a part of that mix and all of these like things that would be cumulatively more expensive than Prime, if they're able to like use the network, like that robotics acquisition, it's like that company is worth 100 times to Amazon what it would be to anyone else. Man, I just find that fascinating, like when to sell a business to. Like if you're the robotics company, you can keep grinding out and being like, hey, we're going to do contracts with this retailer and this retailer and this retailer. It's going to be like an absolute horrendous grind, or you can get $1 billion check and Amazon's just like, leave it to us, see you later.
That's a really good point. You kind of like just wrapped it up in there, but just what stood out for me, what you just said there is like what it's worth to someone else versus one other person. It's like, people that like you can apply that to so many things, like your job, your negotiating salary, like lots of personal things, but especially for business, like if you're selling a company or you're buying a company, like that is such a huge leverage point. Like
we
if you're
sold an asset to a willing buyer at the market.
Exactly.
Fair market value. Exactly.
Wait, so I want to add this to Jack's point, which is so true. But so I think Jack, something you brought up, and I didn't really consider in the Whole Foods. You have to long game it, right? It's like let's actually think 100 years from now how people look back at these deals. If these companies are around, who knows? We might all be in the metaverse. But if they were still around, the thing about Whole Foods is that it's because perishable goods, fruits, vegetables, meats, is so different than books, electronics, right? All that perishable stuff is a totally different game, right? It actually was Amazon's biggest Achilles heel, as in could you argue that somebody can make a better bundle of, right? Then Prime is like, if Walmart figured out fresh foods, they have a more compelling offering than Prime, right? And then we're talking about all this like people cutting certain subscriptions. They might just be, hey man, Walmart's hooking me up with food and all this other random stuff that I get day to day. Maybe I'll cut them. So defensive play makes a lot of sense too. But the last thing I want to ask was Bilal about Twitch and game streaming. So that might be actually, in terms of revenue generating,
that's a beast.
And profitability.
And almost like a sleeping giant in a way too, because it's still like live on the internet. It's still quite small relative to, if you think of live TV and like previous media, essentially.
So if basically, that could be one where you look back like, this is as good as the YouTube acquisition.
Yeah, I think personally it won't be as big as that, but I do think it is really under, like, you don't think about it as much and you're like, oh damn, they basically own that whole segment. And like you said, if you think of it on the metric of time spent and engagement is up there. I do think YouTube's kind of its own beast, you know, but because YouTube also kind of dominates in gaming and stuff as well. And you could argue that if they'd really leaned into the live element on YouTube more than they currently do, like they have the option to do that, but if they really went for it, they could also take some of Twitch's share in that. But I just think there's like a thing with Twitch where that's where people go to do that sort of stuff at the moment. But yeah, it's definitely a big one.
I think the live component is like, that's the most sleeping giant aspect of the platform, where
for Twitch or YouTube,
like media in general, the ability to produce at the speed you need to produce to stay relevant, you may as well just go live. So I think that trend is coming, where it's like, okay, we went from hour produced videos to 5 minutes to 1 minute to 15 seconds to now just turn the camera on,
stream it live. Yeah.
Black Mirror, pay your little tokens in real time. Like, I think that is like, just in the same way, like businesses chop away at friction, like media is going in that direction too.
That's a great frame for it.
I think Twitch will age very, very well for that.
The other thing is the engagement. Like, if you see people giving, like, this is a funny example, but after an Arsenal game, there's one guy called Hugh Wizzy, who's a hilarious dude who used to be in like traditional media, and he's really, really good at just turning the camera on, and he'll stream the whole game, and then after the game he'll keep going, and he has like a 3-hour stream, and he'll get like 50,000 people watching it, which for live is crazy.
It's incredible.
Huge.
Yeah,
it's very,
incredible.
very big. And maybe that's not
just
like
playing what game.
No, that's like, it's like
commentary
on the real game
Unreal.
happening. And to be fair, it's normally not 50,000 people live at the time, but like cumulatively coming in and out, and then, you know, I guess probably watching it after, he'll still get like hundreds of thousands of views. But just a lot of people don't realize, like, the numbers for live is just so much smaller in terms of, you know, getting someone to turn up at a certain time is a difficult thing. And obviously on demand is why, you know, YouTube and podcasts especially are great, because people can listen to them in their own convenience. But yeah, but the engagement of someone being there with you, listening. I mean, Jack and I did it once for Creator Lab, and I know us three have done one Twitter Spaces once as well. But just like the engagement you get, there is something really cool about it. But from the creator's point of view, it's also mad effort. And
it's insane.
Like, it's just there's a certain type of, there's good and bad, but like the stress of it is like something going wrong, like that. You're, especially as me, who I'm like on my podcast, I'm the one who's responsible for making sure it sounds good and you know, there's no issues. Like there is an element of stress that you're not getting with like a recorded thing, but there's also the interactivity of it is pretty cool too. So.
Well, I think, and also what's grown it is video games, where it's like you don't have to plan. It's just like, I'll just fire up the thing and play, and there's something to do, and then there's little questions pop in and you answer them, and it's like this, you're coasting off this massive cultural object as well. Fortnite, it gets bigger, then there's like an interesting streamer that plays it. You don't have to, like, this is not me saying that Twitch streamers aren't necessarily like incredible entertainers, but there is that, like, you're great at this thing and you can just fire up the game and play. And there's like multiple ways to engage people than like reading scripts or coming up with bits or like having good questions being asked. It's an interesting, like, there's momentum that you can ride without being the most creative and original entertainer.
Yeah, it's a different flow. Even like there's been a few recent ones we've shared with each other where there's like a Twitch streamer, but they've got like guests on and stuff like that, and like the style of it is still very much like a stream. It's like a 3-4 hour stream versus, you know, it's like you're hanging out with them and they're talking about stuff, versus like a podcast where you've cut out some of the fat or whatever. Anyway, boys, I think we should move on to the AMA, because I feel like we could talk about it for an hour more. But yeah, let us know what you think of that. What is your favorite or the best acquisition? Not obviously the biggest, because we've already shared that, but like, what do you think is the best one and why? You can put it in the comments below. All right, boys, AMA, we got some killer ones here. Let's start off with a fun one. Kamal asked, how did you make your first dollar? I want to clarify, I'm not sure if he means any dollar or pound in our case, or whatever.
Let's do online and offline, Bilal.
Yeah, because that is your question that you always say is, making your first dollar online will change your life or something. What do you say, Jack?
Yeah. Make your first dollar on the internet. A tiny goal that will change your life. Make your first dollar on the internet. Yeah.
That's it. All right. Go for it. Trung, you want to go first, mate?
No. This is Jack's domain. He
All right,
owns the
Jack.
meme.
Wow,
Yeah,
actually, you know what though? Bilal predates the internet money phenomena by many years for me.
No, wait. Jack's first dollar was at Aldi, playing Super
Aldi
Market Suite.
You know what?
Honda factory.
I was in media distribution before that, boys. Paper round.
Yeah, big media distribution. I knew that was coming. Wait, how old were you though? 7? 12?
I was probably 10, 11, something like that. But before, I don't know what I was doing before that, but I had so many weird jobs. Paper round, worked at hairdressers, worked in supermarket, all sorts of weird stuff. But first dollar on the internet, I think it was, technically visualized value, I think 3 years ago, selling a PDF for $9, I think was my first. Wow. I ran a few experiments. I did a t-shirt business once where I might have sold one t-shirt or something, but the first memorable one that was a repeatable thing was the first visualized value product.
What was the PDF? Is that the
Daily Manifest?
Daily Manifest. You still got that?
Still there. Yeah, it's free now. So if anyone wants to, visualizevalue.com.
Yeah, nice. And there's also there's an app someone made, which if you prefer the non-digital or you prefer the digital version.
People put it into Notion databases. There's a bunch of different spin-offs of it now.
And for our younger listeners, paper round, could you describe what that was, mate? Because a lot of people don't even know what that is.
So there was a paper called the Evening Advertiser in town I grew up in.
What a terrible name.
Evening Advertiser. The Adver for short, it was called. And the village I lived in was just carved up into different routes. And after school, I'd go around this woman's house and there'd be a bag of papers there, pick them up.
Get on your bike,
mate, ride a mile, deliver 18 papers, drive back to the house. And then I think I was getting paid £8 a week or something. So it's probably about
£8 a week.
Oh, it was savage. So I was probably
£8 a week. That's
£8
mad.
a week, 5 nights. So it was it's pretty savage working conditions there, but I had a good time.
But that's when that would get you what 8,000 penny sweets from the corner shop. A little
what was I buying with that?
Coca-Cola bottles or whatever they're called.
Probably 25p Jammy Dodgers. Get that whole rack of Jammy Dodgers. Probably mostly spent on that
money.
Maybe put it towards a little Pokemon cards or Pogs. You know what I'm saying?
I had some Pogs, son.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Tazos as well. Yeah. Get a little yo-yo going, learn some tricks. All right, that was a good one. Trung, what about you, man? I know you did your internship we talked about, but there must have been some other ones.
My first dollar. All right, so I'll say this. My parents were refugees to Canada. My old man was a doctor. He cared about education so much. He's like, get these kids into Kumon, Kumon math stuff. Get them into extracurriculars.
Oh, yeah.
There's all this stuff. He's like, he never actually forced us to work, which looking back, I've actually had out that we kind of regret it. He's like, I should have made you guys work more, instead of just covering everything. But I didn't really start looking for work until 16 or 17, 18 years old. And it's all because during the summer between schools, you have nobody to hang out with because all your buddies have summer jobs, right? So I started picking up all these random summer jobs. I couldn't get a job where my friends were working at restaurants and stuff. I couldn't even get jobs at restaurants. I was dusty. Your boy Trung was dusty.
Dusty.
So my very first job, one of these summers, maybe grade 9 or 10, I painted. You guys have these things in your towns where a kid figures out that the high schoolers are cheap labor, so they act as the as interface.
The broker. Yeah.
The broker. So they just get teams of kids to paint. But man, do not ask Trung Phan to put primer in your house. 15-year-old Trung putting primer in your house, you're going to have to redo that job. So I quit that job after 3 days. I hated it. And then, this one's funny. I did something that Jack did, similar. I delivered phone books. and I threw up my back delivering phone books.
Phone books, man, that is really aging
Literally
you
just
there.
like we literally like my mom.
Phone book, like the yellow
here's the
pages.
thing. I like outsourced my mom to drive me to the location and get the phone books, and then like just stash thousands of phone books in our garage and start handing them out.
Incredible.
And then
Isn't it crazy that we had a phone book? Sorry, just real quick.
I know, nuts.
I haven't thought about it, like Yellow Pages or Thompson, whatever it was called.
Yeah.
The fact that you would look up a business, or like before Google Maps, we'd have the A to Z, we'd call it. I don't know what it's called here. And you'd be in the car and your mum is trying to like go to like
find it.
A6 on the coordinates and be like, take the right, and you go the wrong way. It's crazy.
And you remember when people used to name their business based on that as well, like Aardvark, carpet cleaners or something. Yeah.
Oh, that's smart.
It's like the domain. Michael Saylor would appreciate that.
Let me add two last ones just for your laughter. My first job out of college, university, was construction. I did 6 weeks of construction to put together 5,000 to move to Vietnam. But you guys will laugh. I did the construction for a producer of the movie Speed 2.
No.
So I'm sitting on.
That's incredible.
I dug out this guy's basement and I listened to Jim Rome for 6 straight weeks. My job was to dig out somebody's basement. They wanted to hire.
Nice.
But
I teach you some skills there, man. You need that.
The last thing I'll add is this: is like, you know, when somebody's working, this little Asian guy, and you're the producer of Speed 2, you're not trying to talk to this little Asian dude digging out your basement. I'm just sitting on his deck eating lunchtime, and he's getting out to work. He has a Speed 2 bag, and I just go, Speed 2 was tight. Just looks at me. He's like, fucking idiot. And then, yeah, that's fine. And then the last thing, super quickly, the first dollar on the internet. I mean, I don't know. Technically, it's probably like ads for my newsletters. Like I've never done like a PDF like Jack, but I did it. I took my dad's credit card and sold Air Jordans on eBay. Does that count? I don't know.
That definitely counts.
That's pretty good. Yeah.
So that's it.
Love that one. All right, I'll do mine really quickly. First dollar. I mean, honestly, it's hard to remember like what order this stuff came in. So I'd probably say like offline, it was like I would sell CDs at school. So I'd go down to Stratford, which is in East London, where the Olympics were actually. Before the Olympics, it was a little different back then. And you would go, they had a Sunday computer fair, I think. And I'd go with my brother and we would get like a stack of CDRs or CDRWs. You remember those? For like £5 for like 100 or something. And then I would make playlists and sell them to kids at school, and they were like very happy, like sell them for £5 or something like that. That was probably one of the first. And then the second one was SIM cards, which we've maybe talked about it on here before, but I would sell specifically for the UK people that our age would remember. There was something called O2 Genie SIM cards. So before you had unlimited text and unlimited calls and stuff, it was really expensive to text, right? So you would top up £10 to get 300 free texts, and that was like what all the kids used anyway. And but a lot of people didn't know this, but you could go on o2.co.uk, follow a few steps, and get 6 delivered to you for free. Jeez. And as a student, and I would send them to home and then to my neighbors, and then sell them at school for £10.
Bro, I did that. You remember the CD where you order the CDs to your house? You guys remember that?
Yeah.
I had an abandoned next door neighbor. I just started sending shit to that house and like, yo, I just roll up there. Yo, thank you.
That's what you got to do. Yeah, so that one. And then I will say that one was quite fun, because then there was a guy who is actually, I've seen him pop up on my YouTube recently with like hundreds of thousands of views on his video. He's been interviewed now. And he used to sell the SIM cards for me in his year group. So I would give it to him for 10 and he would sell it for more. I was like, wherever you sell it for more, you like just sell it as much as you can and you get to keep the profit. So he would be selling it to all these kids at school. So those are the two ones.
Understood wholesale and resale at a young age.
and then, so that was probably like 11, 12 or something. And then online, we've talked about 100 times before, but yeah, selling the stuff on eBay, then the little e-commerce site that I had, that was, yeah, we've talked about before, so you can't know the answer. Bling Bling King turned Street Vibes. And the other one, Arsenal Review, that I would say, that one, a lot of people don't know, was my Arsenal site that had 500,000 users on it. It was like quite big, 25 writers, and I used to sell ads directly to people, like, you know, banner ads and stuff, and obviously AdSense. that never made that much money, but it was, you know, that was some money online. And I kind of learned about AdSense, which is quite a big, that actually helped me a lot in the future. And just understanding how like banner ads and programmatic advertising works and stuff like that. So those were the two, probably the two early ones. Go on.
When you were the first Google employee ever to show up at a Google interview wearing a suit, did you bring up the AdSense thing? It's like, they're like, hey, so have you ever interacted with Google properties? Like,
oh, definitely.
I used to run a very popular blog about Arsenal, the football club. And let me tell you about AdSense. You brought it up, didn't you?
I think it was on my resume, like for sure, because it was honestly very relevant skills. Because it was, I mean, I was like a student, just finished university, and I learned SEO. Honestly, not in a bad way, but like most people have never driven a site like that much traffic, and all of the traffic came from SEO and stuff like that. So learning about that was super relevant to what I ended up doing. So yeah, I definitely, I don't know if I brought it up especially, but it was on my resume for sure as like experience, you know.
Bilal, we're very impressed by your resume. You didn't have to wear a suit today, but thank you for coming.
Exactly. All right, boys, next question. Jack, this is the big one. People have been asking for this. So this is Jack NFT transparency time. There were 3 questions about this. So I'm going to break them down. Dustin and Warren essentially asked something similar. So I'm just going to read out in all caps. We need a play-by-play breakdown of all the NFTs you bought. Pull out the spreadsheet. What did each ape turn into? Tricky because of the mutants and dogs. Regrets and mistakes. Welcome to. And the other 2 were kind of quick ones, like will Jack buy NFTs again? And what NFT projects are you watching at the moment? So maybe we start with, it's up to you, whichever one you prefer.
Well, I could get, I don't have a spreadsheet, but you could check the visualizevalue.eth, jckbtchr.eth. So the Bored Apes, I bought, I think the first time we had on the podcast, had 18 of them to begin with. That was the first time we talked about it.
At the peak, how much was that 18 portfolio worth?
I mean, probably at the peak, probably close to $10 million.
Oh my.
Wait, I was about, that's mad. Wait. 18 times what? Because it was worth what, half a mil?
I think the floor of them got to 400K at one point. So, and they weren't all like, there were a couple special ones in there.
Here's your clip for the week, by the way.
So you had a 10 million Bored Ape portfolio, but what were you?
I didn't have 18 at that time. When I first got them, I had 18, and I got back to a cost basis a couple weeks or months after acquiring the first, like all of them. And then I probably sold 2 close to the very top, and the rest were like kind of just leading up to that. So that trade or that set of trades is like basically eclipsed every single other thing in the
ever done
in the portfolio for sure. Yeah, except for build and visualize value for sure.
And the house that you sit in right now was funded
partially by yeah for sure. And now I think their floor of it is probably closer to 100, 120 something. So they really were crazy. And this part of the thing to really assess how well or badly you did is to calculate the value of Ethereum across that time too, because it fluctuated a good amount as well. Like in Ethereum terms, that those investments haven't obviously fluctuated anywhere near as much as they have in dollar terms. There was a couple other projects I got pasted on. Like there was this one run in CryptoPunks where I was like, oh, I'm a genius. I'm gonna start like buying and flipping and selling these.
I think that's called a euphoria phase, mate.
Yeah. So there was, I think it was July or August last year where I bought a CryptoPunk real early relative to what it got to, not like $10 early.
Not like 2017, but like
like early 2020, and I should have just stuck with that one. That was a great buy. I still actually have that first one, and then like I saw it running, and I'm like, I'm smart enough to buy and flip these on the way up, and I did it 3 times. So it's like, I made 10 Ethereum on that one, 20 Ethereum on this one, 25, and then bought the Pico top, and then the whole thing collapsed. And then I ended up selling that last one for to offset some gains on the 31st of December last year, and then bought back in. Tax loss harvesting. And then what else is there? We got the Toads. We're still up on Toads. I bought Tom Sachs, the Rocket. That's a good one.
How's that doing?
It's good, actually. Like they just closed the the ability to get the NFT converted into a physical rocket. I actually missed the deadlines. I just don't pay attention to that stuff as much as I used to.
Are you gonna take the physical?
I can't. I missed the deadline now, so I'm buggered. But I got maybe the Virgin NFT will be worth something one day. What other projects have there been? I've collected a few like one-of-one artists that are all like 10, 20, 30 year, like I think will be incredibly relevant in time. And I just love the stuff. So I'm trying to get some frames to put those up in the house.
Nice. Wait, when you say frames, are they digital frames or they're like physical art?
Yeah, digital frames. So like square, like panels. I'm trying to get some of those, the Samsung frames. Have you seen those?
At the smart frames or?
Yeah, but they have, this is called the Samsung Frame TV, where it has like a matte finish.
I haven't seen that. No,
it's amazing. Cool. So if you have a look, when they're off, you can just display art on them, and it's very hard to tell them apart from an actual canvas. The way the light. Oh wow! Wait, what are they called? I'm gonna
look it up right now.
Samsung Frame TV, I think, or it's the Frame or something. But that will pull it up. What else happened? So the apes by far the best return.
You've made 7 figures on the apes, Garen. Like we'll just put that. We don't have to.
Yeah.
Listen, we're all gentlemen here, people. Listeners, we're all gentlemen and ladies. We don't need to tease out the numbers. There's 7 figures. What is your lesson from the past 18 months? You've talked about it a little bit, building versus betting, but in hindsight, how do you feel about the entire experience?
I think it's very difficult sometimes to tell the difference between instinct and euphoria, So like I think there are people who are very articulate and right about financial markets where like everybody thinks they're a genius in a bull market, right? You've seen that before. And it really teaches you the idea that there are just outliers and outsized returns that lie in individual
asset classes,
actions, asset class, not even asset classes, but like assets within asset classes, right? That keep the whole thing afloat. And this whole idea of where culture goes and how like NFTs were just such a profound example of like attention and how fickle it is and how fast it moves, and like adding that accelerant of like capital into like the way memes move around the internet. I'm honestly reasonably surprised how well some of that stuff has held up through like what we're seeing in the broader market, right? Like it feels like they've stood the test to me of like NFTs as an asset class has stood the test of like horrific volatility, and people still believe in their future upside there.
Well, for the platinum ones, right? For like
the blue chip ones.
Yeah, the ones that are just like part of culture now, and not like in the same way that certain artists or certain pieces of art were indicative of a moment in time and just have been cemented that way. My personal thesis is that like punks fit that criteria, where it's like there is no execution risk with that whatsoever now. It's just a collectible, like a Pokemon card that over a certain period of time is just a cultural artifact that had a tremendous amount of attention directed at it. Whereas some of these other collections have so much execution risk, and they're, we're going to build a game, we're going to build a merchandise line, we're going to license it to this, this, and this. We're going to get this celebrity to buy it and that celebrity. So I think a lot of that was post learning, and even in the early episodes where we talked about it, the like rosy-eyed use cases for things are really, I think, feel obvious at the time. And then I don't think any of the stuff that we talked about early on didn't come true. I think a lot of it is still in the works, but it's very interesting to see how attention and interest and momentum can just collapse
away.
based on like the financial activity and the thing. And that's the double-sided risk that we've always talked about, where it's like, you want 10,000 shareholders in your project, you better wake up every day and have something exciting to tell them. Because if you don't, they're going to get pissed off. And those feedback loops work on the way up and the way down. And that's a big lesson.
Yeah.
I could talk about it at length, but I think that basically summarizes it. Like, yes, I captured a good amount of upside, but I lost a good amount of money as well, like on a couple of things that I had mega high conviction on.
Yeah.
But the
biggest one being probably that punk you just mentioned, yeah?
Yeah.
The tax of heart. Did you say how much it was? Or
I think it's probably at the time was like 200 grand loss.
Down basically. Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah.
But if you did, like, again, if that would have been the only bet you made, it would have been catastrophic. But if you think about it at like,
in the wider spectrum,
but that's the hardest thing to do. Like,
if you want to call it that,
if you can think in percentages and not dollar amounts, I think that's a very powerful skill to have. And everything I think works that way. That's something that even people building their own businesses, right? Like you get seduced by the number, the amount, the like, oh, let's raise X amount of money. It's like, well, how much money are you going to keep? How much money are you making? How much money, how much of this is like a promise of something that's going to eventually happen versus, something that you're making happen in real time.
Today.
So I think that's definitely been a big lesson and I think we said this on one of the other podcasts, is like, when you're not built to trade, like your personal appetite or ability to wake up and stare at numbers and charts and things of that nature. Like, if you don't have that in you, then your investing strategy should be very different similar to what I think you articulate as your approach, Bilal. It's like, I have conviction, I'm buying this, and I'm locking it up, and in 10 years time, we'll see where it is.
Yeah, that was the upside or downside. Yeah, that was the bet
this is not
on
my
anyway.
rent money. This is not what I'm dependent on to like pay my bills. So again, I also talked about how fortunate I was to have made money in the native currency in which I was continuing to make bets in the ecosystem. I wasn't like going to HSBC and saying, hello, can I withdraw, $20,000 and turn that into Ethereum and then like buy a bunch of cartoons. That would have felt a little different, I think.
I definitely did that a few times.
yeah.
No, I get what you're saying. No, you were selling NFTs, earn ETH, and you were able to then reinvest some of that into the ecosystem, essentially.
And I think that helps you, like, that also gives you a level of conviction that a lot of other people don't ever get, right? Like,
if you're seeing it firsthand.
You're a participant in the ecosystem. You have personally, like, this thesis has been validated personally. You made something that is deemed to have value in this ecosystem. So that gives you a higher level of conviction participating in other parts of the ecosystem. So that, like, in hindsight, that would have taken that level of risk had I not been involved in that way. I would say the answer is probably no. And I would have even found out about this stuff if I hadn't been messing around with it. There's completely. No chance. Like, when people say, like, I was on, I walked into a lecture in my computer programming course in 2010 or 2009, and they were talking about Bitcoin. like right place, right time with a compelling explanation, you're like, yeah, I'll chuck in a little bit on that. That sounds interesting. And the risk to you relative to your entire standing in economically is not that significant. But same story of greed, and like you can get to a position on paper where you can dramatically change your life, and for whatever reason, sometimes your brain overrides it and is like, well, what if it went up twice again or five times again? Or, yeah. And like I think that's like a big meme, right? Take profits. It's a huge meme. And I think it's separating the idea of like, are you doing this to make income in the short term? Are you like speculating on a trend that you think is going to be short-lived? But do you have the I don't even know what the word, like stomach, I guess, to look at it every day? Because if you're trading it short term, like, you can't really forget about it. But my barometer, which I think I've explained before, is like, as soon as I'm like thinking about it when I'm going to sleep, the exposure has exceeded my
That's
appetite.
A great test. Yeah, if you're waking up in the middle of the night, Trung, I think you're
I'm saying
muted
that's a Morgan Housel test, right?
Oh yeah, it must be. Yeah, I must have got it from Psychology of Money. Is that? Yeah. So I agree with that thesis. If it's like disturbing your sleep or you're thinking about it first thing or last thing, then you're overexposed.
Yeah, Jack. Just to close that off, then, thanks for sharing that. The Mikhail had asked, will Jap be buying NFTs again? I think that's probably a short answer, but just to confirm, is that a yes?
I still buy them now and again. It's
Yeah.
just like, honestly, my time is just allocated differently now. So I'm buying stuff that is more like buying art really at the moment. Like the collectible stuff is you have to be so close to it to really understand the nuance of it. And my head is not in it right now.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, mate. That was thanks for sharing that. We'll move on now. Dinesh had asked, I'm assuming this one was for me, why did you leave Google, bro? So I guess I think I must have spoken about this before, but the short answer is I was ready for the next chapter. I'd been there for over 7 years. I was probably ready 2 years before that, but I didn't have a green card, so I wasn't able to leave straight away. And I will say, though, that kind of helped me a little bit, because by the time I left, I was sounds very cliche by now, but like running to something versus running away. Like, whereas 2 years before, I wasn't loving my job and I might have been running away from that, versus finding something better and being like, oh, that sounds really attractive. So that's kind of like the summary of it. The more detailed answer is after meeting the founder of Charity Water, which is where I went to straight after Google. I met him on the podcast in 2015 or 16. He was basically, out of all the really impressive people I had interviewed, he was the one that like kind of blew me away and surprised me the most. And just his energy and like what he was doing. It was also a time in my life I was probably, I'm younger, more idealistic. I'm trying to do something drastically different. I also wanted to be somewhere smaller with less people. So Charity Water had like 100 people versus 100,000 people at Google. So that was another big reason. But honestly, I was really like kind of blown away by the mission and stuff. And I was like, wow, that would be kind of cool while I can afford to do it, to work on that for a few years. And I thought that I would have more impact just spending my time doing it than being able to give the money to it, which is an interesting debate, because there's obviously, our boy SBF talks a lot about earning as much money as you can to like give it away essentially, which I think is cool. And he's obviously doing that at a crazy scale. For me, at that particular moment in my life, it was not that. It was more like, I have these skills and they need someone like me to help them at the moment. And in the time I was there, I probably helped raise more money than I could probably ever give in my lifetime as well. So
give a number.
Oh, I mean, it was tens of millions that like we helped raise for the charity, but that was not just me, obviously. It was like the whole team. But yeah, it was pretty cool. And even just like direct things that I did directly, like I've talked about on the pod before, like that $1 or $2 million gift in Bitcoin that we received, that was directly something I did you know, and that was, again, I'm not giving $1 million in Bitcoin anytime soon. And to be able to like spot the opportunity, pounce on it, convince the person, and then be able to do that, like, you know, tens of thousands of people got clean wool because of that one proactive action. And so stuff like that was kind of what I was seeking. So that's kind of the answer. But it was a combination of like the mission, wanting to be in a smaller place, career progression in a way too, because I was taking on quite a senior leadership role, managing a bigger team. And like I had full ownership of the strategy, which was quite important to me because I wanted to be able to like develop that part of my skill set as well. And then honestly, like the management stuff was something that I hadn't done much of, and being able to do that was another kind of up leveling my own skills as well. So it kind of like hit all the areas, and you never get 10 out of 10 for everything, but it was like an 8 or 9 for a lot of things. I would say like the conversation part was the part where I needed it to be enough, but knowing I wasn't going to maximize my compensation there, obviously, though it was still very well paid for that industry. So yeah, that's kind of the main reason I moved on.
And a charismatic cat, right? Just a charismatic dude.
Oh yeah, insane. Are you talking about Scott, the guy? Oh yeah, he's incredible. Like just his skill set is up there with anyone I've seen speak live. And get in a room with him as well. Like the amount of times I went in a meeting with him, and it's just me and him and one other guy, and like just you know, very high level people, like, you know, people we've all heard of, and the way he's able to convince them and tell a story essentially is like second to none.
Reality distortion field, or can we use that?
Probably a little bit, but in a positive way, like not in like the Steve Jobs way where you're like, what are you talking about? But kind of like challenging you to think bigger sort of way. And I mean, kind of what he did without boring people is just like very revolutionary in that space. And he's done a lot of really cool stuff. So yeah, that was the main reason. All right.
You know, hold on. Let me add one word. When you're talking about going to rooms with him, the first word that came to my mind, or term, was glad handing. He was
glad handing.
You're glad handing. Just shaking hands, kissing babies. Just like,
yeah, exactly.
Young Bill Clinton on the campaign trail. I don't want to use a negative. 90s Clinton, man. The charisma was
he was going in.
Oozing.
He was going in. For sure. All right, next question. We got ETH or BTC. Max asked ETH or BTC if you had to pick only one long term. I mean, that is a difficult, I think all of our faces.
I feel like we've touched this a couple times, but
yeah,
it's Bitcoin. If I had to pick, it's just like, if you didn't listen to our podcast with Michael Saylor, I would direct you in that general vicinity. Because
what is the issuance policy of Ethereum?
Yeah. Well, so
you can't have an ever mutating protocol. Okay, you cannot have an ever mutating protocol. This is not investment advice,
but I will say that my frame for it is though. Are you trying to minimize downside or are you trying to maximize upside? Because for me, that would be a different answer.
Answer the question, please, Bilal.
I will answer honestly, and I could be completely wrong, but if I had to pick one, which I wouldn't, I'd pick both and do 50-50 split, ideally. If someone put a gun to my head, I had to pick one, I would, at the moment, still pick ETH, just because I think there's more upside, and that is the part of my portfolio where I'm trying to maximize upside. If I'm trying to hold it like gold, then of course Bitcoin's probably not going to zero and kind of leads the whole market. So for that frame, I would do that. But yeah, obviously I would pick both as well. Jack, what about you, mate? You got a quick one on this?
Not a quick one, no. Like, I feel this is hard now because I'm the deciding vote here. But I would say my personal level of exposure, it's a hard answer.
You probably have way more ETH than Bitcoin, no? Partly because you also earn in ETH.
Yeah. I think I'm gonna have to go with the Bitcoin myth, boys.
All right, fair. Yep. Okay, we got 2-1 here.
I suspected he was gonna say Bitcoin because listeners and viewers, every single time we record and we bring up Saylor, like after the recording, Jack just goes, "Man, every time I listen to Sailor, I feel like I need to buy more Bitcoin." not just our podcast, like any piece of Sailor media, like go Sailor on Fox, Sailor on NBC, CNBC, Sailor on Robert Breedlove, whoever Sailor is, Lex Friedman, Jack listens. Is like, I'm convinced.
Yeah, I think you know, the last episode we did, and when we listened to him, like I think I have more optimism for the things that can be built in the Ethereum ecosystem. That I would make that statement and stand by that. I also believe that the way in which that was established can be replicated in a way that Bitcoin can't be. So that would be my answer.
That's a great point. Yeah, that's a very, very good point. But yeah, to caveat my thing from before, obviously I would not pick either. I would pick both. But yeah, I mean, I agree with what you said there. That's a safe bet. All right, let's...
Jack, hold on. I love Jack putting your feet to the fire. Bilal, answer the question.
We all say 50-50, Bilal.
Yeah, we got a biology portfolio going.
What is the intent? Or what are you saying on Google? What are you doing on Amazon? That's the difference, buddy.
That's true. That's true. All right. Zaid Admani, our boy, who's an amazing TikToker, by the way. If you're not following on TikTok, you should definitely go check out his stuff. He said plans to monetize the podcast. Very good question. I think it's a good one to share with people because I think, well, as people know, we've done this for a year and a half. We haven't monetized at all. Obviously, it cost us money as well. We've spent thousands of dollars on editing and obviously our time.
Let's put the number. So we spent $3,000 and a lot of Bilal Zaidi's unpaid time. So $3,000 to an editor, overseas editor that Bilal Zaidi has managed. Well, me and Jack.
Well, it's been a few, and to be fair, there was some different. The first few episodes, I literally edited the first 2 or 3 just to kind of get the swing of things. I wanted to kind of understand the flow a little bit and then take that to editors I've worked with in the past. So yeah, there's been probably like 3 different editors. Our current one is doing a great job, and yeah, so we've done made pretty good job of like keeping our costs as low as we can with and just to paint a picture for people, we record this on a Tuesday evening by the time it's finished, and we put it out Wednesday morning essentially.
It's hit well, let me bring up that point. It
used to be 3 to 5 days right in the beginning,
and then sometimes with the nature of the dates we're trying to hit, the content would have been 9 days old, right? So Bilal has worked wonders to get it next day,
and especially given what
production.
Yeah,
Antonio, thank you, our boy.
Yeah, and I will say exactly, thank you to editor, but also just to paint a picture, like this is probably, I've paid way more in the past where I had someone in the US and they were great, but like I think the person we work with now does as good, if not as good a job. And with the purchasing power of the dollar, you can obviously spend less money on it for us compared to others. So I think that is something for us to make this sustainable for us. Without monetizing, we needed to keep our costs low enough and make it easy for ourselves, because if we were spending $500 every week on this without any monetization, it would be 12 episodes and we would be like, hey, we're running out of money very quickly. So this has given us the runway to keep things lean enough and still think about how we would want to monetize longer term. So yeah, the answer is we would love to monetize at some point, but that hasn't been the primary reason for doing this. We like doing this ourselves, chatting every week, putting it out for people. But we have talked about, obviously, sponsorships is an easy one. There have been people who have contacted us to do that. We haven't done it yet, though we're open to potentially doing that. The other area which I'm kind of more interested in is like doing stuff directly with the people who listen and want to back us, whether that's some sort of Patreon, whether it's some sort of community, selling merch, which I know we've talked about as well. People have asked for.
Merch. We're definitely doing merch.
Exactly.
No, I agree. I want to add to the community stuff, Bilal, because you mentioned it. After the Sailor episode, we did get a lot of comments like, wow, we would love to have heard like the post-Sailor commentary. And Bilal, you brought it up. It's like, yeah, it's like small stuff like that I think like the real fans would really appreciate. Just more shooting of the shit.
Like behind the scenes.
Yeah.
deeper, so we haven't really thought about that in too much detail, like what that could look like, but we're open to doing it. So if you have ideas and you would want us to do something like that, like comment below, let us know, because I think that would give us some validation that that's something we should at least explore.
Yeah.
I will say a lot of people ask us for a Discord, and to specifically answer that part, we have a Telegram already, which I think works pretty well for what we're trying to do. Discord will be awesome, but it takes up so much time, and that's something we don't have too much of right now. And I know, Jack, you've already got Discord for Visualize Value. You've said it's just there's quite a lot to do there to monitor it and to, make it, to do a good job of it, I think is something we need to commit to. So when we're going to do it, if we do it, we would want to do a really good job and make it a place that you actually want to be in, and still manage it for ourselves in an efficient way. So that's that. There's also, in the height of the NFT stuff, people were asking us to create NFTs. Like, that's something where I'm almost kind of glad we didn't now, given the current situation. But again, we kind of want to walk the walk as well. We talk about this stuff, we're like believers in it. Maybe there is something we could do, turning some of our stuff into NFTs and letting people kind of own a piece of like something that they like. Yeah, is there anything else that we've talked about doing, which we obviously haven't done yet?
Well, let me ask why we haven't done it yet. I think a big part of it is it just monetizing this podcast just hasn't really been that important for either of us, any of us.
It hasn't been the number one priority.
Yeah, and it's like, and we've talked about, we've reached out. We easily could have done many by now, but I think the point is just wasn't that important, and we talked about it a lot. It's like we just actually enjoy sitting here every week, notching on topics. It hasn't really become a job. It doesn't feel like a job at all. It's enjoyable once a week, and did we probably leave thousands of dollars on the table? Like, we're already 70 episodes in. And we haven't monetized at all, probably, but it's fine.
Definitely.
I'm not chuffed about it. Like, I don't care.
Goodwill in the market, my friend.
Yeah.
It's just bottled up.
And that's true. No, also the thing is, when we first started it, we basically said, like, let's prioritize making something good, landing on something that people actually like, and that if you interrupt that straight away with ads, like I did it for Create Lab from day one. I did ads. And I'm okay with doing that. But there was a time in between where I just stopped doing ads for a while because I was trying to re-hone in what it should look like. I kind of evolved a little bit. And then I went back to doing ads again when it made sense. So I think, again, I'm not against doing ads. I think if someone's sitting here for an hour listening, we can speak for 1 minute for an ad, and they can skip it if they want to. Yeah, and we would do something. Clips. Exactly. So we would allow us to invest in our stuff and do a lot more. So I'm not against doing any of those things. I just think, like you said, it hasn't been the number one priority. And but yeah, if you're a brand, I know there's plenty of people who own companies and stuff listening to this. If you're interested, let us know, and we will maybe kind of maybe that'll give us the urgency to move it forward.
Well, with the listener, that's different, right? They'll know.
I have a concept for any brand or video editor out there that I think is a interesting commercial model, where the brand could pay and be attributed directly to the post-production of the episode. So say you want to clip 5 pieces out of this episode, the brand would pay for the production of the clips and be credited for paying for that production.
That's really smart.
You get what I mean? So if you're a video editor, like the brand just we split that with the person that's cutting the clips. And, I think there's a real interesting model there where you could begin to make a market. And we talk about permissionless apprentice. You're muted, Trung. Getting the, I just think there's something really interesting there where you could start to clip stuff up without permission. And like, if the podcast itself doesn't have the budget to pay for those clips, the brand can come in and get exposure to the types of people that watch that podcast, and everyone wins.
Dude, that's actually so smart, because over the months, we've randomly just clipped stuff from our podcast. Tens of thousands of views on these clips. There's no ads on it, right? You literally could just add, I'll do a very salient example. We talked about the Segway with Bezos and Steve Jobs trying to do a pitch on the Segway. That one has 50,000 views on it. just on my Twitter. Could have easily put something there, right? That's really smart, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think you could tie it in with something interesting, right? Like if you had a brand that I think most of the people that are going to be interested in talking to the people that are listening to this podcast is going to be like financial or tangential to, or like an entrepreneurial, like adjacent product. And that like, clipped by or clip paid for by, you could even have like the chevron or the little thing in the corner. It shows that brand's investment in the ecosystem, where it's like, we're investing money to make this stuff more consumable and get it to more people, rather than this like 90-second dead ad read in the middle of the
really
podcast.
Smart idea. I have a feeling that Spotify might be, how they're trying to go programming for audio. This feels like some fruit that they could pull, but that's really smart. Jax, alpha, not investment advice.
There's definitely people listening to this that have that skill set, and you don't need anyone's permission to go and build the like beta version of that, right? Just like, here's 5 clips from this podcast, that podcast, this podcast.
Yeah, I like the idea, mate. But yeah, hopefully that answers your question, Zaid. Thanks for asking that. And yeah, like, let us know what you think. If there's certain things you especially want, let us know in the comments, because that is always helpful for us. All right, boys, we got a few more minutes, so we can bang on with the next one here. So Matt O'Brien, our boy, said, what is the most valuable lesson each of you have learned going solo versus working for a company? Anything stand out? I don't know if that could honestly be a whole segment of the podcast.
I got an easy one.
Go on.
No self-censoring of anything. A little bit, but a lot less.
You mean that you have to censor less? Is that what you're saying?
No, just being public. Like I'll give you an example. When I was working for a startup, I mean, you guys probably done this. Like, when you're doing side projects, you don't want your employers knowing about your side projects. So you'll do it pseudonymously, as we talked about with Board Elon. And like, you're not able to put your full self behind it, right? It's like,
yeah, that's interesting.
And I've done a few things where I had to be like pseudonymous. I mean, it's not super material, but like even writing or trying to sell stuff, you don't have to do it anymore. It's very freeing. It feels incredible. And I guess, I don't know how real it is, or it's just our culture and the bubbles we're in, but this idea of cancel culture, like, no one in a company can cancel me for Slack. Like, it's just, you know what I mean? It's like, cool. You don't like what I have to say? And well, we don't work in a corporation like I would at a Fortune 100 company where you could get canceled for something in a Slack. I don't know how prevalent that is, but that's something always in the back of my mind when I work with other companies.
Got it. What about you, Jack? Anything stand out to you going solo versus?
What was the wording of the question again? The biggest lesson?
What's the most valuable lesson each of you have learned going solo versus working for a company?
You got to create your own pressure.
That's good.
Great. That's a
Could
good
you elaborate on that? Go on.
Yeah. So when you work for like agency business is a great example of this, where it's like, we have a presentation on this day and you have to go in and stand in front of these 10 people.
It's a forced deadline.
For money. Yeah. You have to put something together that's coherent and persuasive, and you're proud to stand in front of. When you work for yourself, you have to manufacture those deadlines in a lot of cases. And the weird thing is, you can use other people to do that. Like, in an agency business, even if you run it yourself, you can make promises to people that you have to keep. But that, again, is just kind of replicating the environment you came from, versus if you're building something that has no external dependency on someone else showing up at a certain time or place, you have to get really good at just forcing yourself to make stuff. I think a lot of people do this with like, hey, I send a newsletter every Saturday. You put something in place that you put in, or I post something up every week, or I do that insight. And then I think the idea of momentum being a very real phenomenon, creativity is a muscle. The longer you leave it between reps, the harder it is to pick up the thing when you get back to it. So, and I think one of the most articulate explanations of this, go back to the last 10 minutes of the Sailor thing, where he talks about, you find something you're good at, like, go absolutely ham pursuing it. And when you get distracted by a good idea, that's like when you're in trouble.
Oh, you think you can do something else? You can't.
Wrong.
Wrong.
Dude,
Except when you're relearning your whole life and dedicating your life to Bitcoin like he did. But
well, I think the nuance of it is like when you have something that's working. So I think the answer that he gave to you, Trung, was better than the way I've heard him explain it before, where he's like, this is the thing that people want to put their thing on autopilot, right? It's like you want to reduce the amount of effort and energy you give this thing, but you still want the same amount from it, or like more from this thing without putting more into it. And that's like the most ridiculous assumption. And that's, I think he's probably
people make
seen
it though. But people make it all the time. They're like, hey, here's shiny object X. Let me try shiny object X. I've done it a million times. We
all do it. We all do it. Yeah. And yeah, I think it's hard to see when you're people. The other, I'm giving 3 answers to this question, but my last one is like, people will try and tell you a better way to do something that they haven't done. That's a very common thing.
That I was about to come to something like this in a second, but yeah, go on, elaborate on that.
So I think there's obviously everybody wants and needs validation from the outside when you're building something that relies on other people to want to consume it. But there's also like a huge leap of faith in, I think any entrepreneurial endeavor where you're putting yourself into something and asking people to believe in it or try it. And there's a million different ways people have said this. It's like the loudest boos come from the cheap seats, or, you get the most criticism from the people with the least skin in the game, blah, 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 blah. The man in the arena, you've heard it, this said millions of different ways. But it's very true, phenomenal. I've experienced it. And I think the best way to not necessarily mitigate it, but to, maybe it is mitigating it. The idea that you can sit down with one person or like have a conversation with one person that appreciates what you're doing or is interested in what you're doing. You're basically just looking to replicate that relationship. And especially doing on the internet, doing business on the internet is so noisy. And then when you get some semblance of reach, I think Trung probably gets this the worst out of all of us. Like, someone takes a joke out of context or ends up on the wrong side of Twitter where people are...
Or Pelosi exactly. Like on a Nancy Pelosi meme.
Exactly. I think it's like that the internet is just this fascinating thing. It cuts both ways. Like it allows you to reach the people that you really want to be connected with and love what you do, but it also exposes you to the people that have very different opposite views to you, and that shouldn't discourage you. It's just a function of civilization. We got to disagree to make progress.
For the listeners, Trung now puts his hands up so he doesn't interrupt.
Trung now talks third person.
I just want to reiterate that Sailor line because I literally just listen to it every time before I jump into a run. I'm gonna hop into a run. It is so good. He goes, as soon as you find a little bit of success, you're gonna start looking to do something else, and you think you can do it. You can't.
Why is that though? It's very bizarre because I think it's like you feel like you've finished, or you feel like the challenge isn't there anymore.
The novelty. It's the same reason why. I mean, listen, we're all in committed relationships here, but
Where's this going? I just saw Jack's face.
That's the analogy you're gonna use.
Yeah. He knew exactly where it's going.
Yeah. I'm playing. Bilal, what's the one number lesson you had? Similar to what you guys were both talking about there, but that kind of, the first thing is the skin in the game thing, which I think is very, very key, which is until you can be in a company and you can, I don't want to use the word coast, but you're being paid no matter what, right? Like you're going to turn up, and if you do a 10 out of 10 day versus a 6 out of 10 day, you're basically being paid the same. Obviously there's repercussions if you don't perform, you get fired, etc. But it's not as instant. Whereas when you're doing stuff yourself and you literally start from zero and you have to figure out, how do I make money every month to pay for my minimum needs and then hopefully a lot more? There's just a certain level of accountability that you have with yourself that you just don't get in a job, and mentally that I think that is
the most taxing part for a lot of people, and that's why I don't think it's for everyone. Not saying it's better or worse. It's just it's not like you have to value the freedom and all the other good parts of it, and the flexibility and the true ownership of what you're doing enough to make up for the downside, because there's a lot of downsides, right? And so that's one part. And something that Jack said there about kind of like the feedback you get is like being able to filter out. I always like listen to what people say, but don't listen to everyone essentially. Like you take it in, but you filter out what's the most important feedback. And honestly, like especially something creative, right? Like a podcast, for example, like we're doing right now. There's not a right or wrong answer for what we're doing a lot of the time. We just had a conversation before this about our focus and should we talk about these topics or these topics, or should we optimize for YouTube versus podcast? And our summary was for, inside baseball here was let's do what we enjoy the most. Yeah. And the rest is kind of secondary because that's what we're optimizing for. If this was a business and we had investors and we need to do certain things to grow, right? And just to be clear, we are growing. Like we've grown every month since we've done this, pretty much, right? And we're doing as good as we've ever done.
Oh, we're doing numbers.
We're doing
potential
all right.
advertisers. We are doing numbers.
Exactly. But that is not being the optimal thing, right? Like we're not like, hey, let's cut up these clips to 10 minutes and put it on YouTube and put it on TikTok. And like we know all of those things will help, but. And so we'll get feedback from people, and I was speaking to someone this morning about thumbnails, and this guy clearly knows what he's talking about. I think he is going to add a lot of value to a lot of people, and probably to us as well, if you listen to this. But like that is one of like 200 things that we're kind of got on a checklist of things we need to improve, and we are already consciously thinking about that stuff. And again, without knowing all the details of what we're trying to optimize for, it's very difficult to give advice, and that's not taking away anything that he's doing. But that is kind of one thing I've realized is like you got to filter out like what is the most useful stuff for you, because people don't know the full context. And so that is another thing. But yeah, really like the skin in the game part is what really sticks with me. Is like when you earn zero money and you're used to earning, a good amount of money, and you start from zero and you're spending $5,000 a month on rent and living costs the way I do, you figure it out, man. Like that really gives you the urgency to be like, how do I monetize my current skills? How do I sell sponsorships on my podcast? How do I do X, Y, Z? And that was the kind of kick I needed. At the same time, I will be honest and say the consultancy work that I do, which I do enjoy mostly, that also kind of feels like I'm not 100% going in another direction because of that too, which is a common thing, right? Because it's close to a paycheck, right, for a lot of people. It's not exactly like a paycheck, but you're getting money every month and you turn up and you do enough work and you'll get it. So that part to me is something I still kind of developing, and I'm not like desperate to drop doing it because it's a good amount of money that I make from that. But it's not necessarily the thing I want to do for 100 years either. So that is kind of how I think about it. Real quick, Trung, do you need to leave in a second for time?
Yeah, I got to boogie in like 2 minutes.
Okay, cool. Because I do have one question that was asked for me and Jack, and we can maybe do it just after you leave, unless Jack needs to leave. Trung, anything else before we kick out, mate?
Yeah, I'll leave a final thought. It's from the Ted Joya interview for the listeners that haven't had a chance.
It was on the front page of Hacker News, if you didn't see that.
It cracked top 10, which is whoever put it. Thank you if you're one of the listeners. Ted Joya, one of the top music historians in the world, big on culture. But he actually said something, which Bilal, as you're talking about, hey, we could have done all these things to like juice the growth, like TikTok clips and YouTube clips and all these. There's all these growth hat things, right? But something he brought up was very salient. I asked him, is like, what do you think about the future of music? He's very anti like shorter songs and just trying to get hits. He just goes, look at a lot of these hits that are happening now that are TikTok made. Like people are finding success with TikTok and then hit the top of billboards. They can't repeat it. And then within a year, they're gone. He's like, who is still being listened to? Who's making the most money from tours? Is it people that do the complicated stuff? Paul McCartney, Rolling Stones, Bob Dylan. These are 3 of the top 5-6 tours in the world. Yes, it's a lot of Lindy built-in stuff, but he's like, I don't think it's a coincidence that the people with the longest lasting power, people that did complicated, long songs that challenged you, things that made you think, and that's what lasting power is, right? And I think what I'm trying to say is that when we're doing this or any kind of craft I do creatively, I really thought about that. And I'm like, man, I can do a lot of things to get the instant hit, like send out a meme now, get millions of people to see it, but like that's not something that's lasting. And that meme cycle, the dopamine, is actually taking me away from doing good creative work. So it was like, what matters? Working on something that matters is what matters, right? That sounds like something Sailor would say. But
that's a nice way to wrap
so I just
that
want
up,
to
beautiful.
I add is like I think moving forward, anything creative, including this podcast, is like I think we kind of talked about it right before. Is like do stuff that we care about because that stuff we'll put effort in, and we're not thinking about what is the YouTube algorithm going to reward. It's like, are we making good shit? Yes or no? So that's my final.
Yeah, and we can definitely if we're gonna create a thumbnail, we'll create one that we think is gonna be better than worse, of course. But that's just one tactical thing. But on the 2 hours we just spent recording this, that to me is the most important part. Like every week we need to turn up and be like excited. Like I'm looking forward to this every week. Like I'm sure you guys are too. And I think that is why we do it. And we're at a stage where that is more important than, I need to make X amount of money. Though, of course, those things need to be balanced. Like if I went to zero in the other stuff I do, we might say actually we do need to.
We're turning on the taps.
Yeah, exactly. And none of us are against making money. I think I actually think that's an important thing as well.
Yeah.
To what we said before in terms of like making it self-sustainable and also the real demand. Like if someone wants to put money behind it or a Patreon, or like people want to pay for extra content, that is the best compliment, not just listening. It's like they're like, we actually like your stuff enough that we want more and we'll pay X amount for it. I love that. So it's a balancing act, and I think as long as we still focus on making it fun and enjoying it every week, then it adds something good in our lives, which is why we mainly do it.
What's the last question for you guys? I'm going to bounce on, but what was it?
All right, cool. Yeah.
What was it?
The question was from Rufus. He said, for the Brits, you've touched on how starting a business and making it is much easier in the States than the UK. So could you go in detail about how, bonus, what was the final push that made you commit to the move?
That's
so
amazing.
This is about UK, US.
Okay, I'm excited.
Jack, have you got a few minutes to talk about this?
Too bad Rick Burton couldn't be here. No,
I know.
I'll hit you guys up.
All right, thanks, Trung. We'll finish this one off. All right, thanks for hanging here, everyone, if you're still here. So to repeat that real quickly, it was about the difference between UK versus US for business. We've talked a little bit about this in a previous podcast. I want to clarify one thing from my point of view. He said, you've touched on how starting a business and making it is much easier in the States than the UK. I don't know if I would 100% agree with that statement. The word making it is obviously very broad. I think specifically for business success, there's probably more upside here for sure. There's a bigger market. People are open to stuff on a business point of view. But making it, I just want to clarify, like, it's quite a more of a philosophical thing. Like if you're spending time with your kids every day doing stuff you like to do, you made it to me. So like, good for you. And I'd actually say Europe is probably better than the US for a lot of that sort of stuff as well. But with the frame of business specifically, what do you think, Jack? Is there anything that stands out to you, mate?
Yeah, I think you said when you were explaining that people are more open to it. I think that's the key insight, right? Who said business is just other people's money? Do you know that quote?
I'm not sure, but yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
So I think that idea of like how people think about their money in any given culture is going to inform how easy it is to start and build a business. And I think that's the key difference, is that there is some element of the American psyche where everybody has a degree of that ambition. Maybe that's a gross generalization, but more frequently you encounter people who are...
I think the average for sure is high and like caring about
and
that.
I haven't lived in the UK
too.
for 10 years, so I might be chatting complete bollocks here. Like
I think that's probably accurate. Like it doesn't mean there aren't ambitious people there. Obviously, it means on average it's essentially the most capitalist market, and therefore it kind of optimizes for that. Like is probably
that's a good way to say it. That's a good way to say it. And it's a younger country, so it's run more experiments, and those experiments have different rates of success and failure relative to a 2,000 and 3,000 year old society that's kind of phased out certain experiments or decided as a culture that that's not a way to approach things long term. So I think that is just reflected in the culture overall. I think failure has way less of a stigma. Yeah. Whereas like some of the rock star founders and business people in the States definitely celebrate their failure. And I'm not saying people elsewhere don't celebrate their failure, but the failure is celebrated with them or seen as like a part of the story as much as
it's harder to shake off, I feel like, in other parts. Like even like on a small scale, like when there's again, this is maybe, I haven't looked at the data for this, but I'm just saying anecdotally from people I know and reading and stuff like that, and even myself, like there is, especially Silicon Valley, coming from our background of like tech, there's, you know, it's very cliche but at this point, but there's like failure porn essentially, right? Like right. Oh, I messed up here, and like it becomes annoying in a way, like
the LinkedIn template.
Exactly like 15 lines with space in between them. So I do think there's a truth to that. Like people are okay, like if you tried something out, you're like, all right, it didn't work out. I think they're a lot more kind of open to that here versus the general population in, let's say, Europe. I don't know enough about Asia right now to really comment on it, but like having worked in Europe for a long time as well, and half of my best friends being from there, and seeing that as well on the business side, is like there's pros and cons, but yeah, that is the part where people are just less open to it versus here.
I think people's work is way more a part of their identity in the States. Like, that's a good way to put it. When you meet somebody, it's like, what do you do for a living? What do you do? Like, that's the first question people ask you, versus like in the UK, you know, maybe it might even come up. And I think that's a great thing too. Like, you just optimize for the stuff that you're interested in, and different markets in, you know, even in the US, about it, even me talking about it, like different markets, it's like places to live.
But I know what you're saying. It's we think of it as like consumers.
Yeah, it's very different.
A market. You're right. Yeah,
it's very different. But like
Birmingham isn't a market; it's a city, right? Like that's
right. Yeah. So like that, even that is indicative of the 10 years of conditioning that I've been under. You know, is you think about the place you live as like. There are many more facets to that you consider. And I love having like that variation too. Is like some people I hang around with and they want to talk about like what they're building, what they're doing, the technology they're interested in, blah, 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 stuff they're speculating on. And then equally enjoyable to spend time with people who could not give two shits about that stuff. Yeah. Right? Just want to hang 100%. Out. And chill and talk about other stuff or nothing.
Do you feel like you went through phases with that? Do you feel like when you were younger and you were probably moved here earlier, like for me, I'll just describe that was my identity or whatever. I was so interested in it because maybe I was looking for it more because I moved here from Europe, where people I was around were ambitious and talked about work a lot. But I'm just saying, when you move here, like you said, it was the first thing, and I was like looking for that too, because I was entrepreneurial and I was trying to meet new people, and in the business world, that was why I came here. Whereas like as I've gone older, I've realized like, oh, of course, like these civilizations in Europe have been like living like this for ages, and the US is just a younger country in its current form, obviously, than a lot of the countries we come from. So there's just an element of like, if you're in Spain and I'm obviously generalizing here, right? But like legit people do take naps during the day. Like, the siesta is a real thing. And I think that's amazing. Like, I love it. Or if you go to Italy for the summer, like people like, they're working, they're doing stuff, but like they're just enjoying life. They're like living lives and they're chilling with the boys and they're having espresso and they're going out and like, having a good time and eating long meals. They're not in a rush to get out the restaurant. They're just enjoying themselves and actually living. And I think that is a wonderful thing. And I keep a lot of that with me. And it's not to say people don't do that here in the States. Of course they do, but it definitely skews.
Oh yeah.
The other way.
I don't think that's a controversial statement.
I think that's just me tiptoeing around it because I don't want someone in my DMs like Trung.
Right. And we are like the worst sample to ask this question to ever, because the two of us have like made that decision. So we're like, I think that idea of like making that choice to move, and like that's indicative of the things you value as an individual, and like the amount of opportunity and like always looking for something new to do or something new to try is, I'm going to say it's a personality trait, but it's definitely like a preference that some people have. and it's uncomfortable.
It definitely can be a personality trait, to be fair.
Right. Yeah. And so, like, I think it all comes down to like knowing what is, just knowing yourself as well as you can. And like, man, it just like, I think the variety of it is what kept me so compelled early on. It's just like such a shock in culture, and so like New York especially is like a different beast. Like just the scale of it, the like amount you absorb. I don't even know if it was you and I had this conversation, is like just the subconscious understanding you have of how many people are like getting on the subway every day to go and do something, and like varying degrees of interesting to you personally, but there's just so many different pursuits and things that people are working on that's inspiring if that's the kind of thing you're interested in. And man, I miss a lot of elements of living in the UK for sure. Yeah, it's just
Do you think it would change as you get older? Now you've got a kid, you're married, you're more settled down, you've obviously moved away from New York. Do you think you could ever see yourself live in Europe again, for example? Or?
Yeah, I think so. Like, man, we would live in Florence. I would love to live in Florence.
Oh. Yeah.
I love that place, man.
We've been talking about this a lot, actually. I mean, it's actually, if you're still with us, like, me and my girlfriend have been talking a lot about where would we live outside of New York, because right now we're in between both our families. We like it here. Hard. In the States, this is where we like. But if we were to move somewhere else, especially thinking with kids and more of a balanced like lifestyle and like good climate, good, honestly, like feel more value in like what you spend your money on, having more space, etc., etc. Like obviously you can do that in the States, but especially because we all work remotely now, it just makes it a lot more tangible to say. I mean, our friend Tom Osman, I hope he doesn't mind us saying this. I think he's talked about it, but like he's moved to Spain, right? So like he's thought about retiring in Spain one day, and he's already gone and done it, which is amazing. Now he gets to enjoy it for his 30s and 40s and 50s versus, oh, like I'm 72 and now I finally get to hang out in Spain, which is cool too if you do it. But I think that wasn't an option when you're going to a Honda factory, right? Like you need to be in the factory every day.
Exactly right.
So so you would be open to it, sounds like.
Yeah, I think so. I think like, again, this is maybe an unhealthy thing to admit, but the like urgency of the culture here is what keeps you competitive too. Go back to the sailor thing.
Yeah.
Waking up every day like there's a like wolf chasing you or whatever analogy you want to use. It's like that's like weirdly built into the culture here, and probably people listen to this and be like, that sounds terrible.
Yeah.
But the alternative is like, I don't know how much grinding I'll be doing if I was like taking 3 naps a day and out like sipping every night. So, it's a balance.
That's a different
It's
vibe,
a balance. Yeah. And I think I think some people achieve it. I also think a lot of people obfuscate or aren't completely honest with that level of balance. Like I think you do have to have a certain level of like mental commitment to something, and it's healthy to rest and take breaks and do things at a sustainable pace. But it's also like, especially in the era we live in now, it's like when you find something that's working, like the worst possible feeling, and I've experienced this, is like taking your eye off the ball on something that is like legitimately good.
Yeah.
And
feeling like you kind of missed out on like something you should, like you've talked about it in the last year, I guess, right? Is that what you're referencing?
Yeah. There's like, you find something that's like legitimately yours and unique and is resonating. And again, the shiny object is like, oh, that looks like faster or easier. And maybe if I do that, then I can go and sit on the beach. And the truth is, I don't want to go sit on the beach, right? I think that's another thing that people have maybe wrong about what they would do if they're in a different situation. Like my preference is to have something that I'm like engaged in and interested in and is challenging and blah, 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 blah. Am I opposed to having a much more pleasant environment around me while I'm doing that? Absolutely not. But there's like, I think a lot of it is, you can't separate everything. There's like a lot of it's like tangled up together and you don't know until you move.
Yeah. No, that was good. Thanks for asking that, Rufus, I think it was. And just for people who made it all the way here, we had a few more questions which we won't get to today, but I've saved them so the next time we do this, I think honestly I would like to do this more often, because I think every time we do this we get really good discussion. But we had a question from Jeff on business ideas, Layman, you asked about favorite tech products, role models from Max, physical routines, barbecue, which will tie in with that. So we've got a few more questions. Warren, you asked a great question on remote work, and Andreessen Horowitz recently talking about the headquarters being in the cloud. That could be its own segment on the pod, so I kind of saved that for next one. So there's a bunch in here. If you want more of these, let us know, because I think honestly these are great. Like, I would do this every week. This is how interesting the convos come. So let us know what you think of these. We can do more of them if you like them. Anything, Jack, before we cut off, mate? We've been at 2 hours now, so this was a nice way to wrap up.
Thanks for everyone who made it this far. It's been a good episode.
Let us know if you made it all the way here, because this is definitely longer than our usual episodes, but I hope you enjoyed it. And thanks again for your support, for submitting Trung's interview on the front page of Hacker News. I don't think we even posted that in the Telegram or anything to vote or anything, but that was
just organic. Uptick. That's what he's talking about, mate. There we go. That sweet, quality, thoughtful content. Just getting the recognition it deserves.
Exactly. But yeah, thanks for being here again. We appreciate you guys. Comment on YouTube so we know what you thought of this one, what you want more of. And we will see you next week for the next one. Cheers.